My name is Nick B, and let's get into this week's futures overview, starting with the Forex Factor Economic Calendar. Monday, Columbus Day, but we have FOMC member Waller speaks, market's still open. Tuesday, Empire State Manufacturing, not much going on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. The real red label news for this week is going to be on Thursday at 8:30 a.m. We have core retail sales and unemployment claims. Then we have crude oil inventories at 11. And then on to Friday, we have building permits at 8:30. At noon, we have FOMC, Waller speaking again. And then the Treasury currency report is on Friday. Okay. It's perfect. Puts us in a perfect position of what's happening. NQ we'll get to in a second, but let's start with ES as always, starting with the daily. Okay. Wow, what a run. ES is an absolute monster. Back from where our all time highs were in July, before we had that correction down towards 51.20, we are way above that. We made new all time highs at 58.30. We got to retest the 20-day EMA, which was also our last all time highs at 57.20 perfectly. Retested it perfectly, got to the 58.30 highs again. We broke out last week, new highs again. So what I'm looking for here is if we decide to slow down, because this is looking very bullish, all we have to retake is the reoccurring levels we're talking about weekly now, get us above 58.68, 58.70. You're probably going to see 58.90, 5900. And I'll be honest, guys, I think into November, what we're really aiming for here, if I'm looking at the chart on the daily, 6,000. 6,000 seems to be the correct target for the year on ES if it keeps up here. But again, the question of what if. So let's kind of talk about the what ifs to the downside too, because I'm all pumped up and bullish about this. It's a definite breakout, but 58.30, that's going to be our, I guess, baseline support. And then the absolute bottom to that is going to be 57.20. So what that tells me is so long as we can support 57.20 and then use 58.30 as a guidance level to bounce higher, to bounce price higher off of it, we'll go higher. But then the moment we break below 57.20, that's going to expose us down to the previous higher lows of 56.70, which was also our contract rollover for this month, last month. And below 56.70, I mean, there's really no real support, I'll be honest, until 5,400. And it sounds rough. It sounds super steep. Maybe not something that might happen, all in one day, maybe not even in a week, but very plausible below 56.70. I mean, that's just going to open up doors for more downside. And you'll see how much more realistic it is on NQ, because NQ is nowhere near ES. NQ right now is actually below its July all-time highs, and we're on the come up. But let me take a look at this also on the 4 hour, maybe on the intraday. I mean, all I can say is on the 4 hour, again, we're using our 20-day EMA as our best friend. So on the daily, that's 57.60. With that in mind, I'm going to assume if on the intraday we start breaking back down below 58.13, 5800, it's going to be a very real possibility we see 57.60. That's the 20-day on the daily. Okay, let's narrow down those probabilities on the 4 hour. So again, we know 58.34 or 35 it is. 58.30 for me. Let's use the round number. It's the baseline support. Again, if we break below 58.30, how much room until the 20-day EMA? That's at 58.20. So I wouldn't necessarily want to short the moment we get below 58.30. I think the confirmation is going to be really along the baseline of 58.10. Why do I say 58.10? Because we seem to hold this area for a few days, 2 days or so, 58.13, use that as support, created a really, it looked like an inverse cup and handle at first. Had we break in 58.11, goodbye. But that wasn't the case. Instead, we kind of inverted and we broke out above the session highs of 58.47. Again, new highs. So if we break below 58.13, yes, short. I mean, excuse me, 58.10, 5800. I would probably short at 5800, put a stop at 58.10 or 58.15. And my first target to the downside is definitely going to be looking at 57.80. Below 57.80, it's that perfect kind of 20-point mark where ES likes to move intraday on breakouts and breakdowns 20 points, so it's perfect. 5,800 breaks, you got that 20 points to the downside. Below 57.80, you have all that room down to 57.60, which is your daily 20 EMA. That might be a tough move to kind of time, but if you target in 20-point increments, you might be able to ride out that wave. Ultimately, again, it's just my heartstrings are pulling thinking about shorting when this is to me clearly bullish. The only real way I would be enticed to short, it might sound funny, is get me below 57.20, get me below the July all-time highs. Okay, I might consider it, but this leans me more towards seeing 6,000 as we approach November and into end of the year rather than more downside. Again, anything goes. We have our levels defined. I don't really even need to bring this down to the 1 hour, do I? Let me see. Well, the 1 hour we can use. Okay, so let me not be ignorant. The 1 hour we can use as a support system using the 20-day EMA, and again, also our previous session highs, which were 58.46. Perfectly, it just so happens the 1 hour is 58.42. So if you see price come down towards 58.40 and you want to take a stab at buying the dip, your stop probably shouldn't be no lower than 58.35, maybe, because that's all you should allow yourself, because really below 58.35 you're coming down to 58.30, and then you have to take a chance on 58.30 bouncing or breaking down. Now you're giving yourself 50-50 odds. Not the way I would play it. Give me something a little more concrete, where in this case, me personally, on the 1 hour looking at this, if we do bounce off of 58.42 as the 20-day EMA, me personally, I'm more inclined to go ahead and buy the breakout of 58.68, because I know now the big picture trend is bullish. I know that the intraday support that trend, and I now have more confidence that the buyers are in here and we're able to, target the breakout of all-time highs to continue higher. And again, above 58.68, 58.70, you're targeting the round numbers, the 20-point increments on ES for me. 58.70, 58.80 is your real target up there. And then 58.90, 5900 is right around the corner. That's that with ES. Let's go on over to NQ. NQ is going to be a little more interesting and a little more precise. We are at a 50-50 point on NQ. What I mean by that is I think we're very close to either going up or down. Well, duh. All right, let's break this down a little bit in detail. So on the daily, again, same thing. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but that's kind of how I do my analysis. It's bullish, right? Same thing. This is a repeat of basically last week, where 20,983 July all-time highs. We know we get above that, we're going higher. We know that. But then we also have the possibility of seeing 17,325. That's drastic. Something bad has to happen. So let me take a little bit more of a closer approach to what's going on here and what are the details I use to pick up on where are we going. Okay, so I'm not going to mark off this range here because it's self-explanatory. We know it's going to break above here, higher, below here, lower. So I want to take a little bit more of a closer approach now on where is price now. And that happens to be the session highs of 20,000, oops, 20,540, and then the lows of 19,800. And again, this range it's going to shrink in a second. The 20-day EMA is at 20,060. Let's take note of that. That was a very key level for us. That was a few times we used that level as a breakout. We used it as support. You could see in these areas here where we initially took that climb towards 20,540, came down, retested the lows 800, and now we're using this as a guide. Okay, 20,060. Let's keep that in mind, because here's the pattern I'm looking at here. Well, two patterns, and I was going over this earlier. To me, at first, I thought this was an evening star. And then the second candle you have here, I'm usually accustomed to seeing bearish engulfings or some kind of a real bearish candle, but in this case, we have a bit of a doji here. Evening stars usually are bearish signs towards the downside for price. It shows you that, hey, we can't quite sustain the buying, but we can't quite yet sustain the selling, yet we're thinking about it. So what are some of the patterns now I can identify that I can use the candlestick pattern to correlate? Well, I've noticed another thing here. When we made the session high of 20,540, and we came up last week to as high as 20,511 or 520 it was. Point is, we never got above that previous session all-time highs, and to me on the daily, this now looks like it can potentially be a double top. If it is a double top, we're going to now use the intradays to kind of isolate what floor are we in between. And from what I understand, the baseline support for the last 2 days before we closed how we did, and the breakout, the initial breakout, was 20,300. I'm going to zoom in a second and we're going to identify it. But what I can understand from here is the minute we get above 20,540, we have to be long. We have to be long. Your first target is going to be 20,600. Above 20,006, your target is going to be 20,007. Above 20,007, you have room to 20,800. Above 800, 983. All you're doing up here above this range is you're retracing the previous lower highs of the candlesticks on the daily. That's all you're doing. That's how you're coming up with these price targets. And again, if ES can manage to break above its all-time highs and keep up the monster push towards 5,900, we're only 3% away, guys. We're a 3% move away from reaching this area here and going higher. But again, can't deny that the daily here, that's what we know to the upside. So in terms of breakouts and going long, that's what we know here. But we can't deny that on the daily, this could potentially be a double top. And if so, how do we kind of take advantage of it? Because I don't want to sit on my hands for 700, 800 points either. And that's where we go on down to the 4 hour right now. Again, keep in mind 20-day EMA 20,060. That could serve us as a target to the downside. Breaking this down to the 4 hour now, you zoom in a little bit and you could see we were making lower lows, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, until we started to break out above. We made a higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. And in the process of making this higher high and higher low in this range, we got above the second lower high. And you guys know when we get above the second lower high, most times it hints at a trend reversal, especially if we're trending to the downside. Most times it hints that, hey, you're most likely about to see some upside. So again, this is a bit of no man's range, because if you didn't capitalize on this move up here, if you didn't catch this breakout here towards 20,500, to try to pick something out here really is 50-50 from what I understand. So what I would do is I would place an alert at 20,300, and that's where I would short. My first take profit to the downside most likely is going to be 20,000. I was thinking 240. It also lines up perfectly on the 4 hour as your 50-day EMA. It's one of the first higher lows to the upside. Yeah, I guess that's fair. Below 20,240, I would take a look at 20,200 as the psychological support. And then ultimately, if on the 1 hour we are showing signs that, hey, we cannot reclaim 20,200, well, we're just retracing our steps back down. In the 4 hour, we're going to come down to the 100-day towards 20,100. And again, probably where I would expect price to slow down is on this higher low here, if you will, of 20,058, which is perfectly happens to line up next to our daily 20-day EMA, and then bounce at worst, bounce off of that area. If again, and if I'm shorting 20,300, my stop has to be 20,340. All because we know that 330 was a previous lower high that we used quite a few times last week as a support when we broke out of. And if we can sustain below 330, I mean, that's going to give us that green light. Hey, you can go lower. I mean, now that I'm looking at it on the 4 hour, your 20-day is 20,350. So if you want to be safe, you can put your stop at 20,350 when shorting at 300. It gives you a 2 to 1. I know it's a bit of counter trend trading, but it's an opportunity in between this range here, because until we break out of here, I can't say this is bullish all the way yet. We're nearing there. We're getting very, very close. And we're seeing signs with that, with VIX last week finally kind of cooling off. We have a gap to fill on the VIX down towards, oops, let me see. Yeah, it's about 1920 roughly, well, the $20 area, but really I like to count my gaps towards where the candle opened personally, because I've been blown out of positions by not taking that into account before. So 19 for me is the target on the VIX to the downside. If we can get there, if it does, wonderful, we'll see that relief and we'll see the double top pattern probably invalidated, a possible double top value pattern invalidated on NQ, and all is well. The other little outlier I'll be keeping an eye on for this week too is, aside from the VIX, I need it below 20, but the dollar. I need to see the dollar lower. If the dollar gets stronger, preferably I'd like to see it below 102.76. Oh, 102.76, a break below that, that would be glorious. You'll definitely see the effect of that on equities. But if the dollar kind of continues to teeter tatter, we start to go for 103 again, 10, possibly, well, this is on the 1 hour. 103, let me see. Yeah, if we revisit 103.18 and we break out above that, it's going to give us room to come up towards 103.55, and I think that would help stimulate that downside that we'll see on equities, where NQ would have the leg down below 20,300, and ES would manage to get its way below 5810, leading down towards 5780, possibly 5760. Again, the daily 20-day EMA, that's going to be our best friend. So long as we keep holding that, the trend is going to be bullish. We're going to continue on higher. But let's see what kind of opportunities are presented to us into this week. We got about 17 minutes until the market opens, and let's make it a great trading week ahead. With that said, thanks for your time, and that is all she wrote. Catch you on the next one. Cheers.